Well, this this is a missionary memory from Japan, and I went to Japan in order to baptize a lady. And what had happened, she was a New Zealander, and she was 18 years old, and she was pregnant, and she smuggled drugs into Tokyo Airport, into Narita Airport in Tokyo. She was arrested, and Japan is extremely tough on any kind of drug smuggling. She was given about 10 years in jail for doing that, even though she was pregnant with the baby. Baby was taken off her, sent to New Zealand. And, well, there she was, and she came across a copy of Bible Basics in the prison library that my dad had sent out. Dad had a thing about sending Bible Basics to prison libraries at one stage, and there it was in one of the women's prisons in Japan, and this woman got it. And I put her in touch with Sister Helen Piper in New Zealand. It was just great. Um, Put a lot of effort into writing backwards and forwards with this lady for some years, and managed to arrange that I would go there and baptize her. She had a tremendous knowledge of the gospel and of Bible basics, lots of letters backwards and forwards, her and Helen particularly. Really did understand very, very clearly. It answered all the questions, very clear understanding of the doctrines. So I went there. I went there from Russia. From Russia to Japan is not a big hop at all. So I did. I looked on the internet a little bit to see what it was like for uh, a woman in a prison, and then I went over there, and so that's how it was. And of course I couldn't really identify with her in that sense because I had not been in prison for drugs and that sort of thing. Anyway, so I have flown in and out of countless countries. I've spent a lot of my life in airports, um, thousands of times. I must have gone through customs in various countries, gone through passport control, gone through customs. I spent my life doing this sort of thing. So I entered uh, Narita Airport in Tokyo from on a flight from Russia, and there were not many people on the flight. And I just had my rucksack, and I cleared immigration. And I was walking through customs, and they jumped on me. Come this way, sir, and said, "Look, we know what you're up to. We know you're smuggling drugs, and therefore, just fess up. The quicker you fess up, the better it's going to be." And so they took me into a cell, and there in the airport, and talk about gaslighting, they said, "Look, it's going to be better if you just admit what you're doing, smuggling drugs. Here's a form to sign, here's a pen to sign it with, just admit it." I said, "I've never done drugs in my life, and I definitely am not involved with smuggling." I said, "No, it's there in your rucksack." I thought, wow, did somebody plant something on me? Um, well, no, not as far as I knew. And I thought, no, that rucksack's been with me all the time. I don't think somebody could have planted drugs in there. Well, they were pretty convinced that I was guilty and pretty rough with me. And not physically, didn't beat me or anything, but sort of pretty aggressive. And they took my documents off me, and they said, "Why are you here? Why are you coming to Japan? And why are you coming from Russia?" Well, I'd been in Russia visiting our brethren, so I said, I'm sort of going around. I'm a Christian. I was visiting some of our folks in Russia, and I came over here to see a woman from New Zealand. "Oh yeah, what's she here for?" I said, "Well, I thought I better, just tell it how it was." I said, "Well, she's in prison, and I'm coming over here to baptize her." "Oh yeah, what's she in prison for?" "Drug trafficking." So I guess I sort of ticked all their boxes. I was a single male with a leather jacket, coming in on a flight on my own from Russia, and I guess they were very suspicious of me, especially when I said I'm coming to visit a drug trafficking friend of mine who's in prison. Well, I'd never met this lady. Anyway, so there I was. They left me for about half an hour in the cell. A guy came in halfway through and said, "Well, have you signed the piece of paper yet?" And I said, "Well, no." Um, Talking about gaslighting, and of course, I was scared. I thought, well, I'm definitely innocent, but that doesn't change anything if someone's planted drugs on me, or so they have. So I guess I'm going to get a heavy prison sentence, and there's my kids and all that back there in Latvia, and they're going to be without me, and it's going to be a complete mess. Oh, oh God, please help me, please help me. Um, and of course, you turn to God, don't you, in extremity? Oh, please forgive me my sins. Please, just this once, help me through this. That's what happens with every human being in extremity. And I was going through all that as I was in this cell, and well, I really felt very, close to God, and God forgive me, please help me, all that. Well, as I say, after half an hour, they came to me, all this Japanese sort of bowing to me, putting their hands together, doing all this stuff. Very sorry, sir. Sort of a thousand blessings upon your head, sir, or whatever they say. Very sorry, sir. You're free to go now. Yes, all okay. All is good. Please take your documents. Please take your rucksack. Well, I just checked in my rucksack. I mean, all there was some really smelly socks because I'd been in Russia for a few days. Some smelly socks and my computer and maybe a book I was reading. And about it. I don't know, could have been a couple of Bible basics or something, but that was about it. And a little package of stuff for the lady I was going to visit in prison. So as I walked out of this thing, I remember they said, "Oh, would you like to? Do you have any complaints about how we treated you? There's a form here, complaint form." I thought, yeah, I reckon. But no, no, I'm good, thanks. I just walked out. Oh man, I was pretty relieved. So anyway, I spent the night in some hotel there in Tokyo somewhere, and in the morning I went up. It's about 3 hours drive out of Tokyo, up in the mountains to see this woman, and all the entire meeting with her and baptism and all that was all under video camera, all under surveillance with the Japanese prison staff present all the way through. So I said, so what's your story? I mean, I knew she was in for drug running. No, she said, oh, I can remember it like yesterday. There I was, young and foolish. And yeah, I did. I'm verily guilty of smuggling drugs. I had them in a whole load of drugs in a suitcase. And yeah, well, I went through passport control, and then I came to the customs, and they grabbed me. And I was thinking, yeah, I can imagine that. And then they put me in this little cell for about half an hour with a piece of paper to sign that I was guilty. Yeah,
Drugs?
yeah, that's what happened to me about 12 hours ago, or whatever. And yeah, and then she said, well, I was in that cell. And she said, oh, I was crying. I thought, I'm pregnant. I'm going to go to prison, and I'm pregnant. I'm going to have the baby in prison. Oh, I'm a long way from home. I'm far from New Zealand. I'm in Japan. Uh, oh, God help me. She said, I never really thought about God, but I started thinking about God pretty strongly then. And I prayed to God. I said, oh, God, if you're there, well, I believe you're there. I'm so sorry I didn't give you my life before, but now I turn to you. I'm guilty. But I turned to you, God, and said, yeah, I really felt like a little girl in the hands of a loving father. And she said, oh, Jesus, I believe you, but I want to give my life to you as my savior, but I don't know much about you. So reveal yourself to me. Well, she was taken out of the little cell, held until she was tried, and then, off to prison for 10 years or whatever. And I was able to say to her, do you know what? I went through something similar. I said, I sat in the same cell that you sat in for half an hour. And I told her my little story, which of course was nothing compared to what she was going through because I was innocent and she wasn't. And yeah, you think, why do things happen? Why do things happen as they do? Um, because I've never been treated like that before. I've been in plenty of dodgy places and corrupt officials and all that sort of thing. I've never actually had that happen to me in an airport. And to be treated like that and gaslighted in an airport in a supposedly Western country in Japan. I've never, I've never had that. Why did it happen just then, at exactly that point? Well, because I was going to visit a woman to whom that had also happened, so that I could, I guess, relate to her. a little bit. And she was, of course, quite enthralled that I had also sat in the same little cell that she sat in. And so this raises the issue of why we go through things. Why do we suffer? Well, the old answer is, oh, well, you suffer because it makes you a better man. Well, whether that is true or not, I don't know. Yeah, to some certain degree, it is true that suffering makes you better, but I don't think that's the full picture, and I don't think it's completely true. That suffering makes you a better man? Yes and no. Quite honestly, I think it's a very cheap answer. I think it's a very cheap answer. When you look at one of the Greek words that's translated suffer, it really means experience. Why do we suffer? Why do we have experience? If it's only for me to get better, as it were, well, as I say, that raises a whole load of other questions which I don't think have great answers. Why do we suffer? Well, here's one dimension to it. What we go through in life and what we suffer is so that we might help others. 2 Corinthians 1 is the clearest on this, where Paul says if we suffer anything, it is for the sake of helping those who are going through the same experiences. So, if you suffer going into a cell in Narita Airport in Tokyo, accused of drug running, etc., that, in my case, was that I could relate to the woman who had also sat there in that same cell. You break your leg. Yeah, you can relate to someone else who's just broken their leg. You lose your mum. You can relate to someone else who's just lost their mum. Yeah? Why do we go through suffering? Well, it is partly so that we might be able to minister to others. And this is true for all of us who have gone through the same suffering. Read 2 Corinthians 1. Paul puts this in so many words specifically. You take Job. Why did Job suffer? Does it make the guy a better guy? Possibly. I remember many years ago in Australia sitting next to Ted Spongberg in a Bible school, and the young brother giving a talk about Job and suffering, and afterwards Ted nudged me and said, he's got it all wrong. He was sort of coming out of the standard line that it sort of makes you a better guy, and it's not that. Job was perfect at the start of the whole thing. Job 1 verse 1, there was a man in the land of Uz, his name was Job, and that man was perfect with God. And Job finishes perfect with the Lord, or mature, or complete, or acceptable, however you want to translate it. So what was the whole deal for? All the suffering and all that stuff? Not so much for himself, but for the friends, for his wife, for their conversion. That was the point, I think. And why do we suffer? Why do we go through stuff? Why do we have any life experience? It is so that we might share with others. But you see, if you shut yourself off, if you close yourself down to contact with other people and go off into some sort of splendid isolation just behind your own computer screen, as it were, that won't happen. You won't have those meetings with people to whom you can share, with whom you can share your experience. And you can help people who have been through what you've been through. And you have been through things. We have all been through all sorts of experiences that it seems nobody else has, until you talk to people, until you connect with people, until you stop talking to each other about the weather or what was on telly last night or whatever it might have been, where you went on your holidays, or all this rubbish that people spend their lives talking about and chit-chatting about. Once you start talking about real life, then you will find that, wow, man is not alone. I'm not alone. My experience was not so unique. And here's someone else who's been through the same. And there is that bond. And it's then and at that point and in that way that you can help someone. And to be truly helpful to another person in their spiritual path, that is the greatest thing in your life. So that's just the outcome of my little experience in Narita Airport.